Yeah. So yeah, so what I'd like you guys to do, I'm just going to restate what I said. If you're watching the recording because you can't attend the session, go back to the PowerPoint, watch this video, and just tell me if it is a violation of freedom of religion. All right? So I'll give you about 2 minutes. Here's some Disney music. I'm going to stop it there. So a lot of responses. Thank you guys for sharing that. So can I have a volunteer maybe that wants to read the response and maybe just elaborate on why they feel it is or is not a violation of religion? Go for it, Pierre.
I don't think it's a violation of freedom of religion because it says that at the end it said, would you rather have 400 people that go to the service and then affect 1,000 more people, and the police just want everybody to be safe?
Hmm.
It's not that they don't want them to worship, because this is a time where
Hmm.
people have faith, but this is a time of where people can't be around each other because the virus can continue to spread and more people can die because of that.
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Pierre. So looking at it, it's not the focus is more of safety rather than preventing people from practicing faith. Lina, I saw your hand up. Would you like to share?
So I was just saying how like it isn't really a violation for the freedom of religion because I mean the government and like every single state has already issued a whole stay at home procedure at the state of emergency, and like that just shows how like just going to services just shows how those precautions that we're supposed to be taking aren't being in effect, and this is causing more like more more danger towards many other people just in general.
Yeah, that's a great. So one thing I like that you said, I think that's important when we're looking at the content is great point in the group chat where they said just like in times where freedom of speech can be limited because if it's a clear and present danger. So one of the things that was brought up is right now, these having these religious services could be. So I thank you, Alfredo, for sharing that. Like having these large services could be defined as a clear and present danger as well if the pandemic is spreading, if the virus is spreading. Um, let's go with Sam. So you kind of went against the group. So most of the people were saying that it's not a violation of freedom of religion, but you said it is. Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, sure. I think it is a violation of freedom of religion because I think that it should be their choice, not like he's forcing anyone to go to the services. It's completely optional, and it seems like he is. Seems like he is taking special measures and precautions to make sure they're all safe. But I think it's their choice. If they get sick, it was basically because of their bad choices, and I don't think the government should make those choices for them. People should make the choices for themselves.
Okay. Any Malika, go for it.
I disagree because I don't think the government's stopping them from like proceeding with their religion. I just think that they're preventing large gatherings. And I
Mhm.
think it's normal because people are actually dying from this virus. It's not like an occasional flu or something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean so that's a point too that I think it's important to look at. Is it the gathering or is it the religion? Because I mean it's a lot of it's not just that one faith. It's all faiths can't gather, right? Annie, go for it.
I agree with Malika because also how I mentioned in the group chat, they're broadcasting they're like mass, like
Hmm.
Catholic and like Christian wise, and other people are using like social media and like different platforms in order to come about their religion and like express it. So I don't really think it's banning it. It's more just that they're preventing large gatherings.
Yeah, excellent. That's a good point too. Is I mean, they're still allowing streaming of services, so the religious faith is present. Alfredo, go for it.
In response to Sam, uh, like while it is the people's choice, the government also has like an important role to like protect its people. And
Hmm.
while Sam argues that it is the people's choice, like what happens if they get infected and then they potentially could infect others,
Hmm.
and the government like has to stop that.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like it's not a violation of freedom of religion. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's I think an important part to look at too is if although you're giving people individual choice, sometimes those choices could be harmful towards the general population. I mean, although he might be taking the precautions, if someone does not take the precaution, it violates those orders, and they go ahead and obtain the virus, then it could be easily more spread. Um, so I'll give Sam, I'll give you a chance to respond. Mildred, do you want to kind of just sum up what you said because I'm seeing a lot of great points.
Uh, yeah. So basically, I personally feel like there is no violation of the freedom of religion aspect. I feel like here what's being debated is, as you stated, more so like whether it's the gathering of people or religion. But I feel like it could be argued that there is a violation of a religious amendment, though, where it's like, I believe one of them is like, oh, you have to love your peers around you and stuff like that. And it's like, they're not being stopped from practicing their religion in itself. Rather, they're trying to stop any potential like spread that can put people in danger. Um, and I know that a lot of people are trying to argue like that have huge religious faith that they feel like their faith and religious opinions will save them from the pandemic. But as it was also stated by other people in the group chat, that you also have to be scientifically aware, because that's something that Sam brought up, was that um, this this man was trying to do his best to make sure that there was like precautionary measures and stuff, but all that it said was that he says making sure that they're standing 6 feet apart with hand sanitizer. And I feel like at this point, with how much it could spread to a person, that will not protect you from a virus that's becoming such a huge pandemic in itself. So if it's like one person is infected, it's practically like inevitable for it to be spread around. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing I think that's important that you brought up is science, right? Science versus religious faith is a way of knowing, and science is still kind of evolving, right? I mean, there's some studies that actually say that 6 feet is not enough, right? So if we're saying 6 feet, if the pastor's saying 6 feet, and all of a sudden later studies show it should be 13 feet, then that means that all those religious services that would have been held at 6 feet distance, I mean, the virus is obviously then still spreading, right? Sam, Sam, I don't want you to feel like everyone's ganging up on you, but I think it's important to have a constructive discussion, which we are having, to look at all sides. Do you want to add on, Sam?
Yeah. So basically, I'll give an example. What the government was not regulating. Basically, I was past my Trader Joe's a couple days ago, and there was a line going all the way around the store, and it wasn't even like a 6 foot apart line. People were really close together, and it seemed like the government had no problem with that. No one was regulating it or anything, but people are trying to regulate the services, and I think that line was more dangerous because people weren't staying apart at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the video that a lot of religious conservatives are being brought up. If liquor stores are considered a essential service, then why is religious service not? Alfredo.
Sure, I forgot to put my hand down.
No problem. Oh, okay. No. So I think one thing that's important that when we're looking at this discussion during times of crisis, times of, I don't want to use the word chaos, because although sometimes things are chaotic, but I'd say just times of crisis, that this issue of freedoms, it's always going to be something that's discussed, right? I mean, it's happening right now. In a World War I, another law that we could look at are the Espionage and Sedition Acts, right? So what I'd like you to do is take notes on this video, and then I'll go ahead and explain to you what these laws were, and then we'll kind of draw the connection on how this is changing home front life in the United States, right? So here we go.
Another kind of disease is loose in the land. Suspicion, attacking all forms of dissent. Vigilantes, operating in the name of patriotism, pursue their own blacklist of enemies. Draft dodgers and war bond slackers. Pacifists who condemn war. Labor groups that insist on voicing discontent. The foreign-born. Wilson's fears of a brutalized, conformist America loom over the nation. The government acts to take the law out of the hands of the mob. The Wilson administration, under criticism as soft on pro-Germans, seeks and gets tough new laws suppressing freedom of speech and opinion. One controversial labor group, the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies, is violently suppressed by mob and government. In Arizona, 1,200 members are expelled en masse to an army post in New Mexico for their preachments and practice of strike with anarchist overtones. Elsewhere, IWW offices are raided by federal agents, their officers arrested, including Big Bill Haywood, their leading figure. Socialist Party leader Eugene V. Debs, who got nearly 1 million votes for President of the United States in 1912, is arrested for a speech considered obstructive to the war effort, is later sentenced to 10 years in jail. With the prosecution of the dissidents, Wilson has both crushed the anti-war spirit and appeased the extremists.
Okay. So just briefly, I know that was a quick video. Just sum up what is going on. Try to be as specific as possible, and then I will give you the definitions that you would need to know to have a academic essay on it. But just briefly sum up what was going on, and then we will discuss it. I will give you the details. So go for it. All right. Excellent. So I know that was a very quick video. They could have probably given a little bit more context behind everything, but I think Reina hit it perfectly. So through that video, you understand during World War I, speech against the war effort was illegal. Differing ideas such as the socialists and anarchists were also targets. So this video, which I'm not going to show you guys because of time, but I've also I think I've shown you before, is so we also had the flu of 1918, I believe it was, and this was during the war. Scientists and medical professions were actually afraid to let the general public know about this flu, and this is happening not just in the United States, but it's also happening in all through Europe as well. The reason why they call it the Spanish flu is because Spain was actually neutral during the war, so they were the first ones to report on it because they weren't in the war. It wasn't going to hurt the war effort. But in the United States, for example, President Woodrow Wilson, he was limiting freedom of speech. Anything that went against the war effort, you could be jailed for it. So what ended up happening was just the word of the flu never got out, and an abundance of people got sick as a result of that. More people would actually die from that flu than World War I, right? And it could have been stopped. I mean, social distancing and all that happened, but it wasn't until later stages when the war was over, right? So, Reina, can I have you elaborate on, and if you don't know, it's okay. If you do know, excellent. I'll open up to everyone else if they do know, is why were socialists and anarchists, why were they also targets and their freedom of speech limited?
I'm not really sure, but I'm gonna guess. I think that they were targeted because I guess it's kind of like they had actually I have no clue.
Okay, no problem. Anyone want to take a guess? Think about the last unit we covered, the progressive units. Okay, they do have opposing views against the government, but what might have these views? Yes, there was a socialist movement. So what do we mean by that? What were they fighting for? Pierre, do you want to take a stab at it? So what was the socialist and progressive movement? What were some of the things that they were looking to do? Think about Upton Sinclair. Yep.
Oh, so so it said my guy that I had for the dating the speed dating, Eugene V. Debs.
Yeah.
He was advocating for workers' rights. So I would say some of them were advocating against factories against the government, saying that it was all bad due to the experiences and due to them seeing what was going on during that time.
Yes. Very good. Excellent. So you're having Eugene V. Debs, right? He's fighting for better working conditions, right? If you're going to fight for better working conditions, what is the best way to, I guess you could say, to get what you want? I mean, you can negotiate. Bargaining is good. But what would be a way for you to get what you want if your employer's not giving it to you? Think about it. I mean, what did the teachers do last year? I mean, of course, we negotiated. Yeah, but you go on strike. And so one thing you understand is a lot of strikes were legalized, right? Because if you go on a strike, what ends up happening is you can't produce weapons, right? The government can't produce the resources that are needed. So I'm going to go through those things right now. So an academic term that you want to make sure that you know is the Espionage Act of 1917 and also the Sedition Act of 1918, right? So Espionage Act and also the Sedition Act. So what this ends up saying is, and this is in the reading that you guys looked at, was that reflected fears about Germans and anti-war Americans. So anyone that showed anti-war feelings, they could be arrested for it. So you're getting anti-war socialists, that they wanted typically more equality in terms of economic equality, right? They were against the government, so they would protest. Well, they were jailed for it, even if they were just expressing how they felt. Some of these people, just like Pierre brought up, was Eugene Debs. I mean, Eugene Debs actually went ahead and he ran for president numerous times, right? But he was jailed specifically because of his anti-war views. You're getting the International Workers Organization with Big Bill Haywood, right? He was fighting significantly for workers' rights, and he was arrested for it because of some of the quote-unquote chaos that the government felt that he was bringing up, right? Because this were all things that were hurting the war effort. So you're getting a lot of mass censorship, okay? Any questions at all about the Espionage and Sedition Acts? And I'll post this PowerPoint too, so that way you guys can use it for your essay. Any questions? If there are no questions, type no. If you do have a question, make sure that you ask. Okay. Very good. So one thing that you want to know is Schenck versus the United States. Schenck, there was actually a court case that brings up that this was not constitutional, right? Remember one of the things I'm telling you, that during times of chaos, right, no matter where you stand, or during the times of instability, during times of unrest, crisis, there's always going to be the debate on civil liberties. And in this case, civil liberties, when you're looking at freedom of speech, were brought up. However, the government rules, the Supreme Court rules that what was done was constitutional, right? What was done was constitutional. Eventually, those that were jailed, you're looking at, for people like Eugene Debs, they were pardoned for their actions. But big picture, I mean, the Schenck versus United States, it states that this was constitutional during that time. Okay? So what I want you to do is just discuss similarities and differences between Schenck versus U.S., the Espionage and Sedition Act, and churches, and the COVID-19. So think about then and now, right? That's what I want you to do is, how is it similar and how is it different? And feel free, because you could address that it is completely similar, but as well as that it is completely different, right? Depending on your reasoning, that's what's going to qualify as a valid response. So take about 1.5, 2 minutes, just type in the chat box. Be ready if I call on you. How are these similar and different? And don't be afraid to take a risk, right? All right, for the sake of time, because that's about 2 minutes, what are your oh, what are your thoughts? How are these similar and or different? Let's go, Alika. What do you think?
I feel like the similarities between all three things is that there was definitely a violation of certain laws, and how the government try to I guess trying to, what's that word? They kind of like suppress the society into kind of going against the government. But then the difference is that the situation is kind of different, in which for the espionage,
Espionage, yeah.
it's a, yeah, and the Sedition Act, and also the Schneck versus U.S. is that kind of involves with how war conflicts. But then for churches during the COVID-19, it was a lot of like health related and science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to look at that. I think you're right. Is the one thing you want to see the similarity is there's the debate of whether or not civil rights and civil liberties are violated. Right, that's a similarity. No matter what, I mean, that's something we can't debate. Like that is the debate. There's the controversial issue of it. But of course, then the difference is how you might approach it personally, right? Pierre, can I have you just elaborate on yours?
Well, I've only talked about two, and that's churches during COVID-19 and espionage, non-sedition act. The similarities I have between them is that if you didn't follow them, you got arrested.
Yeah.
But the main differences is that the churches, you have to be separate from each other. Like you can't have no large crowds. You can't be around a lot of people. You have to be on strict rules during when it comes to like location and places, stuff like that. And then the Espionage Sedition Acts is different from the churches during COVID-19 because you couldn't go against you can't be anti-war, or you're going to get sent to jail, just like Eugene Debs did. Although he ran for president and got 1 million votes, he still went to jail because he was against all that. He was against U.S. going to war. That's why he was sentenced to 10 years.
Yeah, so I think you're right. One similarity is you're looking at enforcement of laws, right? There is a punishment that comes with it if you're going against either effort, whether it's the war or whether it's the war against the virus, right? But I think one thing that we could discuss further if we had more time was which one is seen as an actual threat to danger, right? We're letting these protests and also people that would advocate against the war, was that really seen as a clear and present danger, right? Years from now, we might study by by not allowing these services to happen. Were we preventing a clear and present danger, right? So those are the things that we could discuss further. Those are issues that historians, I think, that would academically look at. But I do want to move on, right? Okay. So I want you to take a guess here. We have not yet covered it, but what I want you to do is just type what you think is. So it's before I do it, itself says churches and espionage are similar because both include the government trying to inform people. So listen what they need to do. Yes, especially during that time of crisis. I want you to take a guess. So Belgium, that was one of the wars, or one of the battles in World War I. It's when Germany, of course, we were against. To get through France, they actually stormed through Belgium in a few days. And what they ended up doing was they ended up killing a lot of innocent people. So what I want you to do is kind of just tell me what you think the message of this propaganda poster is. Type it, I'd say 1 to 3 sentences is fine, in the chat box. Go for it. Right. Oh, sorry. I keep hitting that button. I'm going to stop it right there. That's about a minute. So Sam says America was using what happened in Belgium to have the Germans look bad and help the war effort against Germany through purchasing bonds and stuff like that. Yes, very good. You are right on, Sam, is that they're trying to get Americans to buy bonds, right, to help and contribute with the war effort. I'm going to talk about bonds and liberty loans in a minute, but let's look at this artwork. What is why is this image so powerful right here? So this is something that the government produced. But why? Let's look at this image right here that I'm pointing at. Why do you think they decided to go with this image? Let's go with let's go Juan. Any idea?
Can you come back to me? I'm getting my
Okay,
thoughts
no
here.
problem. It's okay. Let's go Alfredo. Any idea?
Hold up. So we see a soldier and then we see a girl, and to me, what it's basically saying is that hold on.
And what else do you have in the background over here?
You see fire,
Mhm.
and it's basically saying to support the effort because they are saving innocent lives. And
Yeah.
remember Belgium? It was basically like, damn, I don't know how to put it into words, but like it's basically saying to support the cause
Yeah.
because they're saving innocent lives.
Yes.
That's
Right
how I
on. Very
put it.
good. Thank you for sharing. So the first thing is, I mean, you're right on by you're getting this is the German soldier, right? You could tell specifically because of the helmet that he has on, right? And you're getting the portrayal of a younger girl, right, as someone that's being innocent. You're seeing the fire. The fire represents the burning of the village, right? So by using the words "Remember Belgium," that's kind of really hitting the emotions of the audience of remember what happened in Belgium when these innocent people were killed and their villages were burned down, that these Germans are barbaric. You need to contribute to the war. And the best way to contribute to the war would be buying bonds or liberty loans. Any guesses on what a bond or a liberty loan is? What do you think? Sam, you mentioned it in your response. Do you want to share what you think it is?
Yeah, bonds are sort of like mutual funds, but they move up really, really slowly. It's like they have change, but the change is really great. It's basically little change at a time.
Yeah, why might
Um,
that be
yeah.
beneficial for the war effort?
Bonds are basically sort of like government loans. You're basically investing in government loans.
Yeah, very good. So you're giving your money to the government, right? And then what ends up happening is they're actually taking your money and they're investing in the war effort. But your money is, if it's an investment, I mean, it's going to grow over time. So you're buying these bonds. I mean, the bank is taking them. In this case, it's the government that has access to your money, and they're going to go invest it in the war, right? So they're saying that this is a way for you to make money. Is if you take your money, invest it in the war, you'll get that money back, right? So if you're loaning your money to the government, that means that you're contributing to the war effort. So one thing that you want to make sure that you mention for your essay is, well, one of the things that was changing in the home front is the use of propaganda, that there was actually a propaganda commission that was released, and I'll go over, give you the academic term, that they were supposed to sell the war to the American people, right? They're supposed to sell the war to the American people, right? So for example, if let's say Governor Newsom or even President Trump, and they were to create a video or something that were to say social distancing is what's needed, right? That would be in some ways a form of propaganda, right? The government's trying to influence something to make sure that you are engaging in the behavior. In this case, what they're doing is support the war. What do you think is going on here? Go ahead and type your response. Here's another form of propaganda. Messages. Think about the emotion of this man. Think about who's in the background. Let's go with Annie. What do you think, Annie? What do you think is the message here? And I guess the question I'm asking is, why is, looking at this right here, at this man, why is he at the center? And looking at his emotion and looking at his posture, why is that important to understand? So Annie, want to take a stab at it?
Well, he looks very formal. So it looks like they mean that they're actually serious and that people should take, I guess, into consideration the seriousness of the situation that was happening.
Yeah. I mean, he looks very serious, right? I think that's one thing that's really important to look at. He looks very formal, right? He's looking out the window. It says, "On which side of the window are you?" Which side is he on currently right now? What do you think? Yeah, he's on the opposite side, right? And who's on the other side? Annie, I'll have you go. Sorry, I cut you off. Who's on the other side?
Wouldn't it be Germany?
Okay, it's not Germany. No, so these are soldiers, right? But what soldiers are they? I mean, what do you think? I mean, they're American soldiers. We could see the flag. But what do you notice about these American soldiers? They're not just soldiers. What do you? Any observations? It's kind of hard to tell a little bit. Any guesses, Alexis? What do you think? Yes, actually, Raina's got it. Yeah, some of these are women soldiers, right? So I think that this is very important to look at during this time is, number one, you're seeing enlist. I mean, in big bold letters, you see the words enlist. This propaganda poster is saying, hey, you as a man, you should enlist in this war. Which side are you on? Are you going to be by yourself, or are you going to be on the side of American patriotism? And there's a lot of debate when you're looking at this, but some historians actually believe that this propaganda poster is using women on the opposite side. They're portraying women as soldiers. And there were some women that they did volunteer during this time, although they weren't in actual combat, but they did serve in the military. And they did go overseas, and they provided more of an effort in terms of the organizational aspect of it. They served as medics, right? But why would they want to put women in this political propaganda? Any guesses why? Because they are more popular. I mean, or not popular, but I guess it would have been, they could have put men, but they decided to put some women in it. Any idea why? Think about it. This is 1918. This is before women were given the right to vote. So thoughts? Itzel, want to make a prediction?
Actually, I'm not sure.
Okay, no problem. Sam, go for it.
I think what it was is since that was sort of like a sexist time, what they were doing is they were portraying women as soldiers, and they were like, do you want the women to be better than you? And basically they're trying to get more men to enlist so that they could prove that they were stronger than women.
Yep, excellent. I mean, you're looking at the, as Mildred says in her response, well, the toxic masculinity that existed, right? That they're saying that they're trying to make the men feel guilty by saying that if you're getting these women that are contributing to the war effort and you're not, then what are you doing, right? You're on the wrong side, right? In our next unit, one of the things that we'll talk about is, of course, the women's suffrage movement, and then we'll talk about World War II and how World War II would then go ahead and stem a lot of the progression for equality, right? And trying to bring down more of just the patriarchal society that existed, okay? But yeah, I mean, that's one important thing that you understand. Once again, home front propaganda, right? A lot of these posters and leaflets were being just put everywhere. Any questions on that? All right. So here's the academic term for it. You could use the term Committee on Public Information, right? The purpose was to mobilize the people's minds for war. This was, of course, George Creel. He was the head of this commission. And what they needed to do was convince people to put in the war effort. And it was successful, right? It was successful. They would actually have people that would give these 4-minute speeches that would go around and just try to sell the war effort. So one of the things that you would need to do, of course, is ration your food, ration your resources, because it needed to go to the soldiers at home, right? So one last thing, and then we're finished. So you could mention this in the home front, that the amount of propaganda that was released would definitely have a major effort. So let's look at this propaganda poster. What do you think is going on here? It says the woman's land of America. The woman enlists now and help the farmer. What do you think these women are doing? You know, why was farming so important? Any guesses? Yes, Alfredo, very good. So why were they trying to encourage women to farm? Yeah, very good. Farming means food, meaning you're supporting the war effort. So what the government was also doing was they were setting up commissions to make sure that everyone had the right amount of food. And you're right, Alexis, so these men could also go ahead and enlist in the army. So resources was another important part, right? And I want you to think about this right now as well, is resources is something that's very important. I want you to watch this video, and I want you to tell me, what is the Defense Production Act? The Defense Production Act. And I'm going to give you the one last definition that you want to mention in your essay, which is War Industries Board. But first, let's look at this current event. What is the Defense Production Act? There you go.
Ventilators, masks, gloves. This is the protective gear that healthcare workers and patients desperately need but can't seem to get. As the coronavirus pandemic dries up supply chains abroad, there's a new imperative demand to manufacture these products at home. And we keep hearing about the Defense Production Act.
We will be invoking the Defense Production Act.
Defense Production Act.
Defense Production Act.
The president invoked it to compel General Motors and a number of companies to speed up the production of ventilators. He also invoked it to prevent 3M from exporting medical supplies to other countries. But what can the Defense Production Act actually do? And where does it come from? Well, the Defense Production Act was enacted in 1950 to give the Truman administration broader authority to set domestic economic policy during the Korean War. The DPA emerged out of the First and Second War Powers Act of 1941 and 1942, which allowed the White House to compel American companies to produce things like tanks and weapons during World War II. The meaning and scope of national defense has since been expanded by Congress to more broadly encompass domestic preparedness for any emergency, like a terrorist attack or a natural hazard, or like today with coronavirus. The DPA is not a permanent law. It has to be continuously reauthorized, which it has been in one form or another more than 50 times.
A bill to extend the expiration date of the Defense Production Act of 1950.
The DPA initially had 7 titles. Now, 3 remain. Title 1, Priorities and Allocations, which allows the president to force companies, like in this case GM, to not only take on, but also prioritize federal contracts to produce services or products deemed essential for national defense. Title 3, Expansion of Production Capacity and Supply, which allows the federal government to give the private sector economic incentives or protections to mitigate the risk of expanding production for national defense. And Title 7, General Provisions. This enables a series of authorities, like the authority to block foreign mergers and acquisitions if deemed a threat to national security, or the authority to call experienced industry leaders to serve the government. While we're hearing a lot about the DPA now, it's far from the first time it's being enacted. It's not even the first time the Trump administration has enacted it. In fact, a report submitted to Congress in 2019 showed that the DPA was used as justification for lots and lots of contracts. And within the contracts, actual orders. The Department of Defense, for example, quote, places approximately 300,000 rated orders each year, and other agencies have in the past been given the authority to use the DPA as well, and have routinely done so. For example, the Department of Homeland Security used it more than 1,300 times in 2018, in large part for disaster response and hurricane recovery. Those orders range from what may seem like everyday government contracts, like prioritizing contracts for tanks and other weapon systems, but also have included mandates in times of crisis for disaster responses, like in 2017 when the government prioritized contracts for food and bottled water and shelter in Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria. And both Republican and Democratic presidents have invoked the DPA. For example, in 2003, during the Iraq War, then President Bush used the DPA to prioritize the supply of GPS receivers to British troops in Iraq. In 2012, the Obama administration used the DPA to bolster the biofuel industry, as American reliance on oil was seen as a military vulnerability. So, the use of the DPA is not uncommon, and there's context for why it could help the United States create a holistic response to COVID-19 when supply chains have been upended. But time will tell if it'll be used to respond to COVID-19 in a similar way that it's been routinely used to respond to other crises the country has faced in the past.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel.
Go ahead, just write in the chat box. That was a lot, and I'm not expecting you guys to be an expert in the Defense Production Act. I think big picture, we need to understand just why it's important. So just write in the chat box in terms of why this DPA is so important today, and how it could be used today, or how it is being used today. So just go ahead, because I think it's important to be able to draw the connections between now and World War I. So thoughts on that? So write in the chat box, give you some time. Let's be ready if I call on you. Give you about a minute and a half. Just let's get up. Yes, excellent. So you're all correct here. It gives the government the authority to control production of certain goods during times of disaster and chaos. Alessa says, I think it's important for manufacturing a resource that can help protect us and prevent COVID-19 because it can make manufacturing go faster, right? So what are some of the products that we think that are so important right now during this COVID-19 crisis that that people want the president to produce more of? What are some of these? Gloves, masks, ventilators, all of these things, right? And while you are getting some companies that are voluntarily doing so, um, what the president does have the power to do is go ahead and pass this Defensive Production Act for certain goods to make sure that the focus is on those goods so that they're in abundance, right? So that's what you want to make sure that you have an understanding of. This is the government does have the presidential control to act this and draw up these contracts to increase production, right? So, I mean, right now the president is being, some people would actually say that he has done enough. Some people are saying that he has not done enough, right? And of course, I mean, that's a debate politically on where you stand on which aisle. Some people would say that the government should intervene more. Some people are saying that they should not, right? But this also happened in 1918 in World War I, but it was something called different. It was called the War Industries Board. And what this would do is it would set precedent for the federal government to have an economic role in crisis. So the government is regulating the economy. So, for example, one of the things that they did was just the production of passenger cars, World War I and World War II, right? During that time, it would completely stop because a lot of companies such as Ford, they would be focused more on, of course, just weapons, right? Things that were put towards a war effort, right? When you're looking at just food as well, right? That people were instructed to ration certain goods. Although it wasn't mandatory in the United States, in other countries such as Great Britain, Germany, because they were in the war longer, they were required to. They were actually given these ration cards. And every time you'd go to the supermarket, you know, you would have to go ahead and you would, before making your purchase, you had to show them your card. They would need to make sure it was you, and you could only buy a certain amount of product. So, like right now, toilet paper, right? Back then, they were a lot more stringent on it in Europe. So, like, let's say, for example, like now, if I want to go buy toilet paper, they could tell me, yeah, only buy two packages. But if I really wanted to, you could go back again and then buy another two, right? I mean, is it that morally the right thing to do? No, but people are doing that, right? But back then, they were a lot more strict on it. They would actually have a card that they would stamp and say, okay, well, you've gotten your ration of how much you could have. Price controls, all these things are set by the War Industries Board as well, right? Are there any questions at all about that? If there are questions, type in the chat box. If there are no questions, type no. Okay. Very good. Any more? Let's get some more no's. Okay. So to sum things up, remember, this is the prompt that you want to answer. Explain how World War I changed life in the United States. You know what? I think that we've covered all these things in this PowerPoint in this video. Cover that. A lot of you have written your intros already, so go ahead and just continue on with the rest of the essay. If you wanted to go really above and beyond, and in your conclusion, draw connections to how it's similar to changes in the day, feel free to do so as well, because we did address a lot of that. But that is it. That's all I have for you guys for this week. Next week, we'll talk about the Roaring '20s, the Great Depression. We'll look a little bit about finances, right? But if there are no questions, just type here so I can mark you for attendance. And I'll see you guys next week. All right. See you guys. Have a good one. Be safe.
See you later.
Yep. See ya.